Namaskar. We shall continue our discussion on the Taj Mahal, its history, architecture, and symbolism. This is the third part of the lecture series. In the first part, we examined the historical papers that are available, the court papers of Shah Jahan, the Badshah-Nama and his Farmans, and the contemporary travelogues of European travelers, three of them: Manrique, Fray Sebastian Manrique, Tavernier, and Peter Mundi. They were the travelers from Europe, and therefore their travelogues are given due weightage. In fact, I would say undue weightage. And there are contradictions in that, and we have discussed the contradictions. And the court papers explicitly state, both the Badshah-Nama and one of the Farmans explicitly state that the Taj Mahal was a commandeered building. It was known as the Raja Man Singh's palace, commandeered from Raja Jai Singh, and Jai Singh was given a compensation for the building in the form of 4 havelis. Havelis means mansions, for the entire Taj complex and its dependents. Dependents in the sense, other buildings in the Taj complex. We have seen there are 6 buildings inside the complex. And the court papers also indicate that there was, Shah Jahan had acquired quite a bit of marble, large quantities of marble. And we have also noticed that there are a lot of extensive repairs conducted for the Taj Mahal in 1652 under the guidance of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb has written a letter to Shah Jahan delineating what are the repairs that he undertook for his mother's tomb. And in the second part, we looked at the minarets. See, these minarets and the dome are considered to be features of Islamic architecture. And it is mainly because of these 2 features. Of course, there is a third feature which is called the single pointed arch, but not so much, not so weighted. The dome and the minaret are considered to be very important features of Islamic architecture and particularly Mughal architecture. Because of this fixation in our mind, people do not accept that these court papers, even though Shah Jahan's own papers say that it was a commandeered building, people don't accept it. Then they saw that there were underground chambers, not 1 or 2, there are 22 underground chambers which have been closed and sealed. And this sealing and the closing of this came to light only in 1900 under the British rule. But even so, people are not able to accept that Taj Mahal is not a Mughal architecture, a pre-Mughal architecture. They don't accept it. Therefore, in the second part, we examined the minaret as an Islamic architecture. The minaret is an Islamic architecture, that is true, because it evolved because of a functional utility in the mosque. That is, the minaret is used to give the call of prayer to the faithful from an elevated place. And because of this elevated place, the requirement of the elevation, the minaret is taller than the main dome usually. So that's how it evolved. But it so happens that the Taj Mahal is not a mosque. It is a tomb. And the mosque built beside the Taj Mahal, the mosque which is being used as mosque, the building which is used as a mosque beside the Taj Mahal does not have any minarets. Not only that, the mosque usually has a single minaret, whereas Taj Mahal has 4 minarets, which defines a frame of reference upon the skyline. They are ornamental minarets. And the so-called Islamic architecture in India during the Pathan architectural period, that is the first 300 years of the alien rule, the Pathans, starting from Muhammad Ghori up to the end of Lodi dynasty. The first 333 years did not use minaret as a feature of Islamic architecture. Their first attempt at Ajmer failed, and after that they did not use it at all. Not only that, even the Mughal architecture, the so-called Mughal architecture built by Babur, Akbar, Jahangir, and until Shah Jahan, did not use minarets at all. So the first 440 years of the Islamic architecture in India, starting from 1192, did not use minarets as a feature of Islamic architecture. It was adopted from the Taj Mahal. Post Taj Mahal, they used minarets. Shah Jahan's architecture post Taj Mahal and Aurangzeb's architecture did use minarets, but it is borrowed from the Taj Mahal. That's what our conclusion was. So if I just briefly connect it, the minaret of the Taj Mahal does not belong to the category of Islamic minarets. They are ornamental minarets, not the functional minarets of traditional mosques. The minarets of Islamic architecture were not essential part of the first 440 years of Islamic architecture in India. After the initial fiasco at Ajmer in 1192, the minarets are not part of Pathan architecture nor part of Mughal architecture until the time of Shah Jahan, who acquired Raja Man Singh's palace. The Taj was the first of its kind, which became the trendsetter for the subsequent Mughal architecture of Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb in terms of minarets and also the so-called Mughal gardens. What we are going to examine today is about the dome, the single pointed arch, as well as the bulbous dome. The Taj dome is known as the bulbous dome because it looks like an onion bulb. Neither of these things, according to me, were essential or exclusive features of Islamic architecture. Let us see that in greater detail. First, let us look at another feature, that is a mosque built in the Taj complex or mosque in the Taj complex. Normally, the mosques are built facing the holy Mecca, the direction in which the faithful is commanded to turn while he prays. But the mosque inside the Taj complex is facing the cardinal west instead of the holy city. You have to turn towards Mecca for prayer. That is the Islamic norm. So the mosques have to be directed in that direction. But the mosque inside the Taj complex is not facing the Mecca. And here is an expert, Marvin Mills, says this. By the 9th century AD, the Muslims are able to calculate the direction of Mecca within an error of 2 degrees from any city in the world. The mosque that is part of the Taj complex faces due west. It is the cardinal west, whereas Mecca from Agra is 14 degrees 55 minutes south of west. Remember that Shah Jahan was in 16th century and the Muslim architects knew how to calculate the direction of Mecca as early as the 9th century with an error of 2 degrees, but this is an error of nearly 15 degrees. It is a different matter that they did use it as a mosque. This is the Taj Mosque facing the due west. This is a congregation inside the Taj complex. Okay. This is the overall picture, the plan of the Taj complex. Mosque is here on the left, top left. Yeah, facing the west. And there is a Jawab here, which is almost identical with that of the mosque, built as a mirror image of the mosque. That is why it is called Jawab. It is a reply. It is a mirror image of the mosque. But inside the mosque, you see, this is inside the mosque, you see, there is a pulpit here. And you see that this pulpit is certainly a superimposition. It breaks the pattern here. Had it been part of the original design, they would not build it like this, right? It is an imposition. It is an imposition. It breaks the pattern not only upon the wall, but also upon the floor. It is an imposition. More than that, you also see there are places here which are blank. It is very unusual that you leave spaces blank. Okay. On the top of this arch, inside this arch, on the side, there are plain marble slabs. They do not contain any kind of ornamentation, any kind of calligraphy. Whereas typically, this kind of a calligraphy which you see on the border could have been here also. If not calligraphy, then some other kind of artwork. It is very unusual that you leave the wall blank so much. I am sure this is Shah Jahan's work. He commandeered a building. And then there are things which are not acceptable to Islamic architecture. He removed them and put marble slabs on that place. You see on the top left also, you will see some break of pattern. It is supposed to be an inlay work, but then there is a break in pattern. Usually it is covered by some artwork of this kind. If the artwork contains harmless things like flowers, they left it alone. But if they contain images of gods or human beings or Hindu symbolism, wherever possible, they removed. What they did not notice, they left it to continue, obviously, but wherever it is objectionable, they removed it and replaced it by their own work. You see this pattern here. It is not an exact mirror image. The two sides are not same. This is an imposition. This is an imposition. This is inside the mosque on the arch. You see the patchwork done here. It is an imposition. And they did not even mind leaving it as it is. See, this is what happens when you commandeer a building and the building is so huge and the work involved is so much. At corners, you just left it as it is. Evidently, it was a touch-up work. Now, there are symbols which are typically Hindu symbols. For example, this is called bellflower in Hindu tradition. Bellflower are sacred to Shiva. And that is the reason why P.N. Oak was saying that this must have been a Shiva temple. Bellflowers are sacred to Shiva. This is outside the mosque. You see this border. There is no calligraphical work here at all. This is outside. Inside, I have shown you. This is also. See here, there is a blank marble slab pasted to the window. Here, the border is empty. What they did is they dug up an ablution tank, water tank, where they could wash their feet. And then they use it as a mosque. The pulpit that we have seen there doesn't exist in the Jawab. Typically, it is calligraphical work that fills the border. But here also there are blank spaces. So they did whatever they could, but they could not cover the entire building. Wherever they could not cover, they put slabs. That's about the mosque. Now look at the single pointed arch. See, this is the single pointed arch. The arch has a one point, and so much is said about this single point. This is single point is an Islamic symbol because it signifies one God. It is a monotheistic symbol. This is what historians often say. And therefore they say this is typically Islamic, and India did not use this kind of things before the invasion of Muslims from the west, from the northwest. It is not necessary here to go into the debate whether the single pointed arch and the arcuate style of constructing it. There are two types of constructing an arch. One is called the arcuate style, another is called the Trebiat style. The arcuate style is the superior style. Therefore, historians, especially the British historians of the 19th century, said it must have come from outside. The Trebiat style is inferior. In India, you can see both the styles. However, they say that the arcuate style must have come from outside. Yeah. Whether the single pointed arch and the arcuate style of constructing it was exclusively Saracenic origin. But these features were part in South India. Therefore, it is reasonable to assume that it was part of Indian architecture of North India also. It was part of the Taj Mahal as suggested by the radiocarbon dating, which suggests about 300 years prior to Shah Jahan. So this is from the Vijayanagara architecture. This is a single pointed arch. Of course, you may doubt whether this is a later addition because there is some plastering here. But then it was universal in Vijayanagara Empire. See, this is the place where they would tie the elephants. It is an elephant shala. And every arch is a single pointed arch here, whether it is small or big. And Vijayanagara Empire started in 1363 and ended in 1565, much before the Mughal period. Started 2 centuries earlier to that. And E.B. Havell, another British historian who wrote his book Indian Architecture in 1913, says it must have been quite common in India, single pointed arch. And he relates it to the Ajanta caves, which are estimated to be 1st century AD. It may be 1st century, it may be earlier also, but these are stone carvings. So it is difficult to estimate the period of this. It is estimated as 1st century AD, which means at least 1500 years before Babur. This is where he says that the symbolism of single point in the arches have come from the Ashwatha leaf, which is part of the Hindu symbolism. You can see this kind of relief here. Ajanta caves. Okay, let us look at the bulbous dome, which is perhaps the second most important feature of Islamic architecture. It is generally believed, because of the British historians, that the bulbous dome seen in the Taj Mahal migrated to India or brought to India from Samarkand. Samarkand is the original seat of the Mughal dynasty. Mughal dynasty began with Taimur Lang. Taimur Lung is a 6th generation predecessor of Babur. So his seat of empire was Samarkand, which is currently in Russia. And Babur established his dynasty in India in 1526. There are significant differences between the Arab domes seen in Baghdad and Egypt and the domes of Samarkand. All domes are not the same. Varieties of domes. Ferguson himself has classified 13 different types of domes in India. And outside India, in Baghdad, in Egypt, in Samarkand, in Persia, in Ghazni, there are domes, but the domes are not all the same. The dome upon Humayun's tomb in Delhi is close to the dome at Samarkand. I'll show you the pictures of both. It is also believed that the bulbous dome of the Taj Mahal is derived from the dome of Humayun's tomb. I'll show you the photographs of both. Now, this is a dome which cannot be called bulbous dome because it doesn't resemble an onion bulb. This is in Egypt. Of course, this picture is of a mosque which was rebuilt in the 20th century, 1929 to 45. It has 5 domes with a central dome which is somewhat resembling the Taj style. But I'm only showing it as an example that this is not a bulbous dome. And you can see a minaret. Minaret rises well above the dome because it has a functional utility, or at least tradition defined a function for that minaret, and therefore it is taller than the main dome, and there is only one minaret. In Islamic architecture, there are no 4 minarets. This is Samarkand. This is called the Taimurid architecture. Taimur Lung established an empire in Samarkand. Of course, this building may not be entirely built by, or as it was built by Taimur. It might have been modified, but the dome is said to be the Samarkand architecture. There are 2 domes in this building. I'll show you a close-up of that. 2 varieties are there. The central dome here, it is a precursor of Humayun's tomb. It looks like Humayun's tomb had borrowed this model and built in Delhi, built by Akbar in Delhi. The other one, this is known as the fluted dome. There is a lines here. There are lines here, fluted dome it is. It looks as though the surrounding building here may be much more modern than the 14th century building. It is the same building taken from a different perspective, highlighting this fluted dome. You see that it is sitting on a drum here, almost a cylinder upon which it is sitting, and you have a certain type of a curve upon the dome. Notice the finial here. Finial means the pinnacle of the building. It is a plain pinnacle. Humayun's tomb also displays similar pinnacles. But the base is upon a drum. And the entire building is around the dome. There are no other architectural features which will beautify them, but it is a dome, and the dome alone is the building. This is Humayun's tomb. The dome is similar to the Samarkand architecture, except that the drum is not very, very tall. But the finial is straight up, one piece. This is the close-up of Humayun's tomb. But this is not called bulbous dome. This is Samarkand on the left. This is Humayun's tomb on the right. The Humayun's tomb on the left and the Taj dome on the right. You see the curvature of the Taj dome is different. It is more, what you say, the people use the word feminine. And it has an inverted lotus on the top. This lotus flower is an Indian symbol. Because in Arabia or due north, there were no lotus flowers. They were not part of Islamic architecture at all outside India. Islamic architecture in India copied this lotus, especially after Shah Jahan acquired Raja Man Singh's palace. Whatever he built it with inverted lotus. Aurangzeb also copied the Taj dome. But what we call as Humayun's tomb is not the same as the Taj dome. Here at the bottom, there is a lotus flower which is in bloom, whereas on the top, there is a lotus flower inverted, but it is not in bloom. It is not a fully bloomed lotus. And then there is a pinnacle. Pinnacle traditionally indicates the deity within in Indian temples. Now, comparing Akbar's architecture, which is Humayun's tomb, to the Taj Mahal, the architectural styles, Ferguson was perhaps one of the most important classifiers of Indian architecture being followed today. Today's classification of our history books depend on Ferguson's classification. He wrote 3 books in the 19th century. This book is taken from, this quotation is taken from a book which he published in 1865. He compares the two and says that they are very much unlike. It's a point to be noted. See, Ferguson awarded Taj Mahal to Shah Jahan only, called it the epitome of Mughal architecture, but he also says that it is quite distinct from Akbar's architecture. See the emphasis that he gives on that point. It would be difficult to point out in the whole history of architecture, any change so sudden as that which took place between the style of Akbar and that of his grandson Shah Jahan, nor any contrast so great as that between the manly vigor and exuberant originality of the first, as compared with the extreme but almost effeminate elegance of the second. Certainly, when the same people following the same religion built temples and palaces in the same locality, nothing of the sort ever occurred in any country whose history is now known to us. Can the emphasis be greater than this for anywhere in the world? Any architectural break? He says, when he says the style of Shah Jahan, he identifies Taj Mahal as Shah Jahan's architecture. And now he says, this Taj Mahal, this Shah Jahan's architecture is entirely different from that of his grandfather Akbar. One is manly vigor with exuberant originality, and another is effeminate elegance, he says, feminine elegance. And he says, when the same people following the same religion built temples and palaces in the same locality, nothing of the sort ever occurred in any country whose history is now known to us. This is Taj Mahal, and this is Shah Jahan's architecture proper. This is the Jama Masjid of Delhi, said to have been built by Shah Jahan, completed in 1658. Now, if look at this architecture and compare it with that of the Taj Mahal, and say, somebody who has built Taj Mahal in his younger days, said to be between 1631 to 1653, officially people say that 53, but Shah Jahan's Bajanama says it took about 12 years. That means 1631 to 1643, it must have been built. And when you build in 1658, would you build it like this? Look at the main gateway, which covers the main dome. Why would you build a dome at all? A gateway covering the main dome, it obscuring. In the Taj Mahal, the entire architecture, you should look at it from the point of the totality of the Taj complex. How is it built? You stand in front of your main gateway, enter the main gateway and take the picture, it looks like this. The complete elegance, the complete beauty of the Taj Mahal can be savored once you enter the Taj complex. From the main gateway, the entire vision is so clear on the skyline. Look at the minarets, they are defining a boundary upon the skyline. It is like putting a frame to a photograph before you put it on your wall. You just imagine this. Without these minarets, it would look very, very dull. And extremely proportionate. And you see the size of minarets and size of the dome and size of the building, so very proportionate. Not for nothing, the Taj is called the eighth wonder of the world. It would require a comprehensive vision, and the size indicates that it requires an army of architects, masons, craftsmen to build this building. An army. It is not just one or two. And we notice that the chief architect of this building is not noted in Shah Jahan's records at all. Look at this building and compare. No doubt that the dome was copied from the Taj Mahal. See the inverted lotus, it is copied. See the finial, it is not the Taj finial at all. See the minarets here, they're incomparable. They're not comparable at all to the minarets of the Taj Mahal. Do you think the same hand which built the Taj Mahal also built this after gaining that experience? This is the Taj Mahal copy, copied by Aurangzeb in Aurangabad. It is called the Bibi Ki Maqbara. It is a tomb of Aurangzeb's wife who died in Aurangabad, and he built a mausoleum there, which is supposed to be a copy of the Taj Mahal. And everybody agrees that it cannot be compared with the Taj Mahal. It's what happens when you copy. Therefore, it is called the poor man's Taj. And you see the Taj Mahal on the left, Bibi Ki Maqbara on the right. Compare the two buildings. And I'll give you the comment of Ferguson again. Says Ferguson, few things can show how steadily and rapidly the decline of taste had set in than the fact that the tomb in honor of her memory, Rabia Durrani, wife of Aurangzeb, which was intended, it is said, to reproduce an exact copy of Shah Jahan's celebrated tomb, the Taj Mahal. But the difference between the two monuments, even in so short an interval, is startling. The first stands alone in the world for certain qualities all can appreciate. The second is by no means remarkable for any qualities of elegance or design and narrowly escapes vulgarity and bad taste. What is Ferguson saying? Ferguson is saying Shah Jahan's architecture, read it as Taj Mahal, doesn't come in the same line as Akbar's architecture, nor does it come in the same line as Aurangzeb's architecture. And we have seen the masjid built by Shah Jahan himself was a very poor copy of the Taj Dome and very poor copy of the minarets, and is vulgar in the sense that the main entrance covers the main dome. It doesn't indicate any taste. Aesthetics is extremely poor. This is called the Badshahi Mosque. It is Aurangzeb's architecture in Delhi. Here also he copied the Taj Dome. There is an inverted lotus there, but there is no, the finial is not, the Eid Ki Chand Gera is not seen here. Nor did he copy the minarets. Minarets are short. But this is the Badshahi Mosque, Aurangzeb's architecture. Yeah. Now, wide, but the classification of Ferguson says that this was introduced, this is the Mughal style, introduced in India by the Mughals, borrowed from Samarkand. You have seen the number of buildings that are there in Samarkand, which can be called architecture, but yet he says it has been borrowed from Samarkand. Now look at what he says. He says, it is probable that very considerable light will yet be thrown upon the origin of the style which the Mughals introduced into India. Please note that he has not studied it yet. Very considerable light will yet be thrown upon the origin of the style which the Mughals introduced in India from the examination of the buildings erected at Samarkand by Taimur 100 years before Babur's time. Now that the city is in the hands of Russians, it is accessible to Europeans. Its buildings have been drawn and photographed, but not yet described so as to be available for scientific purposes. While making this statement that it was introduced by the Mughals in India, he has not studied it. It is inadequate data, but it is more of an assumption. But it is well known that Taimur attacked India at the end of the 14th century. 1398, he sacked Delhi and surrounding places. And then he carried off a large number of architects and other craftsmen as captive labor to build his capital, Samarkand. I am quoting from the autobiography written by Taimur himself, Mulfazat-e-Taimuri, which is translated and available online today at from various internet sources. But I have quoted it from the book by Eliot and Dawson. It is maybe the second major attempt to write Indian history during the 19th century. The first was James Mill's History of India. The second is History of India as told by its own historians. That is written by Eliot and Dawson. Eliot started it, Dawson finished it. And it's an 8-volume effort based on the court historians of the sultans and the Mughals that they wrote this book. So in that, this Taimur's autobiography was translated. I have taken the passage from their book. Says Taimur, I ordered that after sacking Delhi and the surrounding places. In Delhi, he killed more than 1 lakh of people, unarmed people, to show his religious fervor. He is considered one of the greatest, you can say, one of the worst, you can say. He conducted one of the worst genocides in human history. Now, he took many people as slave labor from India, and he says, I ordered that all the artisans and clever mechanics who were masters of their respective crafts should be picked out from among the prisoners and set aside. And accordingly, some thousands of craftsmen were selected to await my command. All these I distributed among the princes and amirs who were present or who were engaged officially in other parts of my dominions. I had determined to build a Masjid-e-Jami in Samarkand, the seat of my empire, which should be without a rival in any country. So I ordered that all builders and stonemasons should be set apart for my own special service. He took thousands of people as slave labor, and he built his Jami Masjid, of which the photograph I have shown you earlier. But this is the comment of another historian who wrote his book in 1913, Havel. Havel was a professor, he was a principal of a college, he was an art historian and architectural historian, very serious, very well-written book. He says the Taj Mahal is essentially Indian in origin, style and taste. He says, he did not say that Taj Mahal was not built by Shah Jahan. He gave the credit to Shah Jahan. But he said, the fact that Shah Jahan has built it doesn't make it Mughal, doesn't make it Islamic. The style is entirely Indian, he says. Look at what he says. He connects it to the Shilpa Shastras of India. He says, in two of the most important, namely the Mughal and Bijapur styles. Somebody was asking a question about Bijapur styles. Havel speaks about Bijapur style as well, the Gol Gumbaz and other things. He says, the Mughal and Bijapur styles, Ferguson and all other writers have ignored the Hindu element entirely and treated them both as foreign to India. Here, I think they are as mistaken as the archaeological experts who have attributed the inspiration of Indian sculpture to Greco-Roman craftsmen of Gandhara. In the 19th century, it was very common for the British historians to connect everything to Europe. So they were saying that the sculpture was borrowed from Greece or Rome, and the architecture was borrowed from the Muslim invaders. But Havel says, it is Indian art, not Arab, Persian or European, that we must study to find whence came the inspiration of the Taj Mahal and the great monuments of Bijapur. They are more Indian than St. Paul's Cathedral and Westminster Abbey are English. Not the emphasis he lays, not the superlative he uses. They are more Indian than St. Paul's Cathedral is English, he says. Taj Mahal belongs to India. That's what Havel asserted. And not just one statement, he gave adequate arguments for that. The beauty of the Taj, so far as the structure is concerned, culminates in the supreme grace of the central dome. The dome of Humayun's tomb differs from that of the Taj in many essential points. The former is of the Saracenic type of Persia and Central Asia. That is, it is not stilted like the domes of Arab tombs in Cairo. It is Central Asian, not Egyptian. And instead of springing directly from the drum in which it is built, it is corbelled out so as to overhang the drum slightly at the base. Otherwise, it resembles the Arab type of dome in having an unbroken contour from the springing of to the crown. The pinnacle or finial being only an insignificant metal spike coming out of the crown. Whereas in the Taj Mahal, it springs as the stem of the inverted lotus. Continues Havel. The dome of the Taj, on the other hand, is growing up from the base with exquisite tenderness and subtlety, as if the master craftsman would sum up in its perfect contours all the grace of ideal womanhood. This is what he calls as feminine grace. We shall see that the curve is not a single unbroken one, as in the typical Arab dome, but has three marked divisions. First, the incurving at the base, where a band of inlaid decoration marks the springing and suggests a lotus flower holding the dome within its unfolded petals. Secondly, the main structure or center of the dome. And thirdly, the pinnacle, which does not rise abruptly from the crown, but is connected with the center of the dome by another lotus-like member, which has the petals turned downwards instead of upwards. Then he connects all these things, what he said in this passage, to the Shilpa Shastras. Now, if we refer to the Shilpa Shastras, says Havel, above the Adhisthana, there is the Griva. See, these words are Sanskrit words taken from the Shastras. Above the Adhisthana, there is the Griva, the neck of the dome, which is the drum or polygonal base on which it rests. The Griva is crowned by a projecting cornice called the Lupamala. Above this is the Shikhara, or the main portion of the dome itself, which is bulbous shaped like that of a Buddhist dagoba, and springs from a composite lotus molding consisting of three parts, 2 rows of lotus petals connected by a bead molding called the Malabadha. The Shikhara is surmounted by the Stupi or pinnacle, which has 2 pinnacle principal members, the Mahapadma or the great 8-petaled lotus, joined to the Shikhara by a molding called Pattika, and the Kumbha or Kalasha, the symbolic water pot. Coming from a British historian who has studied the Shilpa Shastras and compares the words and the whole structure of the Taj Dome. He continues, this structural arrangement is not Saracenic. Saracenic means Islamic, but essentially Hindu. It is known in Hindu architecture as the Pancharatna. See, Taj Mahal has 5 domes. The central dome is surrounded by 4 minor domes, smaller domes. It is called the Pancharatna, the shrine of the 5 jewels. or the five-headed lingam of Shiva, symbolizing the five elements: earth, water, air, fire, and ether. A typical example of it is found in one of the small shrines of Chandi Seva at Prambanam in Java. So Indian architecture had spread to the Far East as early as 1000 AD. Angkor Wat in Indonesia is Hindu architecture built by a Hindu king. So he's referring to the Chandi Seva at Prambanam in Java. It's full of architecture. And he says the model can be seen there, the Pancharatna model, which has an arrangement of domes strikingly similar to that of the Taj. The date of completion of Chandi Seva given by Sir Stamford Raffles and accepted as approximately correct by Mr. Finney Spires is 1098 AD, nearly 5.5 centuries before the Taj was begun. And he says before the Taj was begun, he assumes that Shah Jahan had built it. But the style is Pancharatna style. The style belongs to the Indian Shilpa Shastras. This is the Pancharatna style. The dome is not that of a Taj dome, but this is a Shiva temple in Bangladesh, in India. Havel did not refer to this, but he referred to Prambanam in Java. But it exists in India also, not one or two, numerous examples. These are minor temples, therefore it did not draw attention at the time of Havel. Yeah, this is Pancharatna style. This is a reconstructed model of a Buddhist monastery in Nalanda. This is also Pancharatna. See the four minor domes and the central dome. This is also Pancharatna. This is in West Bengal. It is a terracotta structure. Therefore, Havel draws his conclusion. He says, the Arabs, Tartars, Mongols, and Persians who came into India had much to learn from Hindu civilization. And it was from what they learned and not from what they taught that the Mohammedan art in India became great. The Taj Mahal belongs to India, not to Islam. Yeah. So here I conclude the third part. And in the next part, we will look at the legend. Then how is that such a legend has come into vogue, was accepted, what led to its acceptance and sustenance? That's what we will examine in the next session. Right now, we are concluding the part of examining the dome. We have done it for minarets, we have done it for domes. We have done it for single-pointed arches as well. And if there are any comments, I would invite you to say that.
Sir, I just had Harinath, can I speak?
Yes, Nagi, please go ahead.
Sir, I had one question.
Yeah.
You have presented so beautifully today about various comparisons. One thing I wanted to ask was, in the history or is there any kind of artifact or documents or anything which is of Raja Man Singh's period, which talks about this palace?
Not that I know of. You are saying
Okay.
whether in the Rajput records whether there is any mention of this building.
Yes, yes.
Not that I know of. I don't know. It's not
Okay.
come to light yet.
Okay.
Yeah, but in Shah Jahan's documents it is there. At two places very explicitly he says he has taken Raja Man Singh's palace for the burial of the queen. One is Badshah Nama itself, that is the court history written by Mullah Abdul Hamid Lahori. He says that it has been commandeered. And another is after commandeering it, 2 years later, when the construction was still going on, he gave compensations in terms of 4 Havelis, major Havelis only, belonging to Raja Madho Singh and Bhagavan Das and that kind of people who were princes. Their buildings he handed over to Raja Jai Singh and explicitly stated that nobody should obstruct this. It is final. We have handed it over for in exchange of Raja Man Singh's palace. This much he has said.
So the other Rajput architectures, I'm not sure of their dates. The Pink City, so many palaces that we seen, we have heard of in Pink City, Jaipur, and other things.
Yeah.
They're all, at least from what we know, earlier to the existence of this palace, or are they later, or because those have been well documented, right?
Yeah, they have been documented. They must have been documented. At least I have not studied them from that point of view to list them and present it. I have not studied, so I cannot comment on that. The exact date of those buildings, I do not know.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any other comment?
Hello.
Yes, Yogesh ji, please.
Subarna ji.
Yes.
I think those Nagi was talking about major of the structure may be of the Madhya Yugin. Madhya Yugin means between 700 to 1400 or 1500 construction. Maybe those our Rajput kings have constructed all those. Major of the temples and other things are coming under that. Another thing which I would like to point out something. The things which lately I have joined because of some work. Pancharatna things which you have mentioned over here, isn't it?
Yes.
Pancharatna style of the construction
of
our temple or all. In the Middle Age, there are certain temples are there. They are known as the Panchayatans. Panchayatans means there is a principal deity is there in the center, and 4 other deities are there at the corners. So in these Panchayatan temples are there. Panchayatan all murtis are there. Panchayatan carvings are there. Even Panchayatan copper images are there. So in that major of the places, Ganesha, Devi, Shiva, and other 2 deities were being included in this. So that may be the starting of the Panchayatan also, maybe that what you may be thinking of Pancharatna, or it might have been connected somewhere or the other, I don't know. But
see, the architecture of Rajasthan which we see today may belong to the what we call as the Middle Ages, may be true. But then when we discuss history, we need very concrete evidence of the dates. What Nagi was asking, do we have something which can be shown that is earlier to this and these things existed, type of a thing, which we don't know. I agree with you. Shall I continue? Shall I continue? I agree with you that in a temple there are many deities. This is very common. If you go anywhere in Bangalore or Mangalore, I can show you many temples where there are multiple deities. One main deity, and then other deities are kept in different corners. worshipped. This is a very normal temple architecture. And there is, see, as regards to the specific temple, there is a hierarchy. But otherwise, there is no hierarchy. In a Shiva temple, Ganesha will be sitting on one corner, Kartikeya will be sitting on another corner. These kind of things are visible. So this is very common. But as yet, we are not saying anything about this being an exclusively built as a temple. We do not know.
Yes,
It's suggestive, and that's why we can say from an academic perspective, it is suggestive of that. The moment you draw conclusions based on conjectures, conjectures can lead further research, but you cannot draw conclusions on conjectures. So it weakens your argument, it weakens your presentation. So I don't wish to do that. I would say, yes, it suggests these things. There are a number of symbols which indicates temple architecture.
Yes, yes,
As of
definitely.
now, what we know is that it was Raja Man Singh's palace. That is conclusive. When did the temple become Raja Man Singh's palace? This is not known. If at all it were a temple, it is not known. See, the drum houses, it is a feature in a Shiva temple. I can show you number of Shiva temples where drums are kept and they are played during the puja, because the Shiva and drums are connected. And we see
that is-
drum houses, major buildings, not ordinary structures, major buildings which are called Nakar Khanas. Nakar Khana means the drum houses inside this campus. But yet we do not know whether it was a temple, whether it was built as a temple. If yes, then we need to provide the dates. I would say that the first thing that we ask for, we need, is actual historical dating based on the scientific experimentation, scientific tests, like the carbon dating. And we can get 20 different samples of wood from the underground chambers. There are 22 rooms. Each one of them can provide you a sample of wood. We can do that dating. That is one. Another is the thermoluminescence test, which talks about the bricks. When was it kilned? In a kiln, when the brick was burnt, that date can be identified approximately. But if you take it across this complex, 20 different samples, we can come to a conclusion. That dating is required before we go further. If that is conclusively proved that it is 300, 400 years earlier to Shah Jahan, say, then yeah, how did it become Raja Man Singh's palace? And what was its original purpose? This can be developed further.
No, that is, I mean,
Yeah.
that totally depends upon the government
Yes,
to do the scientific
yes.
research on
But
that.
we have enough evidence to say that a test need to be conducted.
Yes, yes, that because of the evidence, we feel like it should be conducted.
Yeah.
It should be conducted. The research should be conducted. So we
Based
can
on that,
ascertain the correct, timing as well as the who is the person who
Yeah.
made that, or who was the real constructor of that.
yeah, who is the real builder
Even you see, I had been to a small places in Rajasthan. There the small forts are there. They have got a written history out there. I have seen a book of account, 200 years old, lying like a kachra patti in one of the corner of the. When I opened the pages and all, then I tear up the pages. Now I have lost that page, but it was written in that time language. It was somewhere around 200 years old. Paper was there. They used to write the account. In that I read, this much oil has been burned, this much anaj has been brought, this much anaj in so much amount, so much amount. But that other thing I could not decipher with that of this. These things were written in the books of account. Not only that, we used to write. Whenever we used to construct any murti for devs, vagera, In Gujarat, I have seen it. Other places, I have not marked it. Or at that time, they used to write the Shilpakar's name and the time, or the at that time, whatever the samvats or that used to write at the carve at the back of the effect. After fixing and after puja, we may put so many things on that, milk and all that. After that cleansing, you can come out. You know the person who has carved it also after that. But that who will permit all these things? So many things are involved in that. That is the
Also,
thing I have found it in some
Correct.
200 years old things I have found it.
no, Yogesh ji, one thing that could have happened here is these people would have destroyed many of those evidences also. That is
Maybe,
a possibility we cannot rule out.
maybe
Because
possible.
one
Maybe
legend
possible.
is there, right? One legend, and but sir can confirm, sir, that most people who were involved with building Taj Mahal, they were punished, I think, because
Yes,
it is
yes.
said that Shah Jahan didn't want them to build one more similar structure.
It
That's
should
a
not
legend.
be.
That's a myth,
Yes,
maybe.
yes.
But then
That has
that
been
will be a
noted.
way to tell that they destroyed a lot of evidences, and maybe some of the key architects were Hindus, so they were killed or mutilated.
But I have heard that the Ellora Ajanta caves, the present day people are coming over there. The present day whose ancestor, those who have carved those caves from the top to bottom, they are coming every year on particular day over there with their old ojars and their all their chisels
good
and
point,
other hammers
Yogesh
and
ji.
other thing, and they are doing the pujas over there. If we
Got
can
it.
locate them, we can get something out of them how they were doing it, and
No, no,
for
no.
that
It's a
can
very
give a
good.
guidance to the other monuments also.
Right,
How the
right,
things
Yogesh
were
ji.
being.
What you are telling is good, sir. One thing that comes to mind is, it might, as you rightly said, what is evidence is it's a Mansing's palace, and Mansing's own that building. Now that
Mhm.
might not be a full-fledged public temple, right? If the temples are
Yeah.
very well documented, or any tampering with the temple would have created a public outrage.
Mhm.
So that's one line of thought, isn't it, sir?
Yeah.
That,
But last lecture I could not attend and I have not gone through. But it has been found that there is an underground tunnel which leading up to the Yamuna river bank.
Yeah.
So maybe the queen at that time, Mansingh queen or the Mansingh Raja, maybe going there to Yamuna and doing the river pujas and all that. Maybe that is one of the
possible, yes.
things have been thought on that.
Right.
There is underground tunnel is there going up to the river bank of the Yamuna.
Because touching any temple would have created, people would have remembered it. So it's a private building.
No, this is the
then,
private. No, this is the private.
Sir, what is your comment, sir, on this?
See, if we look at the carbon dating, it indicates something like 300 years earlier to Shah Jahan.
Mhm.
It gives you some 1359 AD plus minus 87 years or so. That is the period it indicates, but it is only a single sample. Only a single sample. So we can't depend on that. But however, if you accept it as a conjecture, as a proposition, if a building, a temple was built 300 years earlier, now that it is a palace, during the period of 300 years, it got converted into something else. What could have possibly happened is, what happened across the North India is that the temples were destroyed. Hundreds, thousands of temples, somebody said 47,000 temples were destroyed. This building also could have been a temple overrun by invaders and used it for a different purpose, may have been commandeered back or won over by the Rajputs, that is the lineage of Raja Mansingh, and he was using it as a palace now because it was already converted into a palace from a temple. He did not reconvert it into a temple, but used it as a palace which was in use already. Possible. Yeah, but
Right.
the first of them is that we need a dating, proper dating. In fact, See, the proposition which I just mentioned was mentioned not by me, but by Professor P.N. Oak. Oak had made this proposition that it was a temple based on a lot of symbolism, which I have also cited.
Right.
Yes,
right.
Symbolisms are clear. Symbolisms are clear that could have been a
Yes,
temple.
I also seen it that symbolism is very clear.
Sir, yeah, even Anand Dabak was saying, right? Because he had contacted KK Mohammed, who is one of the great architects.
Yes, yes,
He
he has
himself,
also.
Mohammed also, sir, also seems to have said that, this requires more investigation. Now, the
Yes.
very fact that he has said it requires investigation shows that he also suspects, right? Because he is very, very knowledgeable, very dedicated in this field. If it was not true, he would have straight away said not true.
Hari, Muhammad's suggestion about investigation, he was suggesting a line of examining the brick sizes and all that. That will not do. The dating
that
of
is
Okay, I
not
missed
enough.
that point, sir. Was it only limited to bricks or was it, I thought it was the whole thing.
what Anand said, he suggested that the brick sizes of Jahangir was different from the brick sizes of Shah Jahan. How can you accept this? I mean, the same kilns could have been used, the same size molding can be used by the another king. How can you differentiate on that basis? What we require is there is a greater, more exact scientific method of dating the bricks, dating the earthen pots, dating the wood. They should be used. And to use that, you see, you can't just go and take a piece of wood from the Taj Mahal. You can't. You can't touch it. Marvin Mills did it because it was a broken piece from a wall. But if you start scrapping the wood there, they will arrest you for that. So it has to be a decision by the government. And if the government decides, it can be done in one day. All that I am saying is that we have enough evidence to go for those tests. Once you
Yeah,
fix the date,
point is made, sir. I think you're making your point is made. Nobody is contesting that. It is just that some additional points are being made. That's all. Nobody is contesting your point of that further study and government sponsored research is required.
Basically, it should be a very.
in the next session, we shall see how the legend took roots. See, this legend came into being approximately in the 19th century.
Okay.
It is a
Okay,
time
so-
of Ferguson that it came into being, and Ferguson lent credence to the legend.
Sure. Okay, sir. So we'll take it up in the next session. So any other comments from anyone else? Okay. So if there are no other comments, we will end the session today with the Shanti Mantra. Nagi, I request you to do the Shanti Mantra, please.
Namaste. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.